Hello everybody, my name is Mariako, and today I'm going to teach you how to hide your lighting in Minecraft. If you've spent any amount of time building in Minecraft, you probably know why this is useful. The lighting system in the game is just a hassle to work with, and it usually forces us to mess with our designs and add in light sources that we don't really want, just to keep things lit up. So it's nice to be able to just sneak the extra lighting in here and there when we actually need it. Now, there are two things that you need to know for hidden lighting. You need to know your light sources, as well as the blocks that the light can pass through. If you know both of these, then hidden lighting becomes relatively easy. Since they're the quicker of the two, we're going to go ahead and focus on the light sources first. Now there are a lot of things in Minecraft that are light sources. Even things like end chests, brown mushrooms, and brewing stands emit some level of light. But for the sake of hidden lighting, we really only want the brightest light sources possible, so we're going to go ahead and remove the darker ones, as well as any that you can't really use in survival. Since our lighting is hidden and we don't see it directly, we don't need to keep the expensive options in either, so we'll remove those as well. Of course, if you have a witch farm or a guardian farm and you have double chests full of this stuff, then feel free to use it. Fire and lava can be used and are worth keeping in mind, particularly fire since it only takes netherrack and a flint and steel to create, but because they're destructive and have a loud ambient noise which you don't normally want, we're going to go ahead and ignore these for now as well. This leaves us with torches and jack-o'-lanterns, which are your best sources for hidden lighting. A lot of the time either one is fine, but each have their benefits, so if you intend to hide a lot of lighting, you may want to get yourself a good pumpkin farm. I'm also going to bring back in the redstone lamp, as it has some very specific uses in hidden lighting, which we'll cover in a little bit. So that covers our light sources, and now we're going to move on to the blocks that we can use to disguise them. Before we begin, I do want to make a quick note on stairs and slabs. These do not allow light through, even if you can directly see the light source behind them, and even if it appears visually that some light does come through, they're still actually blocking the real light levels. They can be used for some cool aesthetics, but keep in mind that they'll do nothing to prevent mobs from spawning. Moving on. The first and most obvious thing that light can pass through is air, and it's a surprisingly useful thing to keep in mind. A good example of this is a cave system. Due to how rough they are, you can pretty effectively hide lighting just by placing a light source in a recessed hole in the ceiling or wall. If you're going for that overgrown look in the cave and add leaves to the equation, then you can disguise the area even better. You can also do things like have a recessed area in a wall and have light emitting from that, if that works with the style of your build. As simple as this method of just placing a light source in a spot that the player can't see it is, it's really quite effective. Next up, the second most obvious block that light will travel through is glass. And since we have stained glass in the game, it can be used as a nice decorative block, as well as a way to sneak in some extra lighting. One trick that I see used quite often is to use stained glass to cover up holes in the ground where you go to hide your lighting. Obviously this isn't an ideal solution, but if you're trying to light up a big open area without building anything to hide your lighting in, you really can't do much better. It does help blend the hole a little bit and make the transition a little less harsh, and if you can combine it with some grass or flowers or maybe even a bush, then you can help disguise it even further. Of course, if you're hiding your lighting underneath a bush, then you can also just replace that glass with the next block on our list, which is leaves. If you're working on a natural build style and you have a lot of leaves around, then they're probably going to be your best friend when it comes to hidden lighting. Anywhere you have a pile of leaves is a good candidate for hiding some light, whether that's a bush, some overgrowth on a cave ceiling, or in a tree. Of course, the default Minecraft trees don't lend themselves very well to this, since there isn't really anywhere in them that you can hide your light completely. But if you'll build yourself some custom trees, then you can easily sneak some in. One other method I've used to help disguise lighting around this particular tree is the use of carpets. These are helpful in a surprising number of situations, and should always be kept in mind as a way to help obscure your light sources. In this case, using brown carpet is an effective way to hide lighting without burying it deep inside the trunk of the tree or deep underground. It's not perfect, but if you're just running past, you're not likely to notice the carpets anyway. Of course, the biggest benefit of carpet is when working with interiors, and it makes for an extremely simple and very effective way to hide your lighting. You'll normally be using this in combination with jack-o'-lanterns, as you can place those directly beneath the carpet, and you don't need to worry about particles like you would if you were using torches. Next up are pistons, a block that many people still don't seem to realize allows light through, but it's easily one of the most useful on this list. Pistons are great for this because they give you two good textures to work with, one working well with stone type blocks and the other working well with wood, particularly oak. They aren't a perfect match, but if you can integrate them into your design a little bit, they can do a great job. And they also have the benefit of being able to face in any direction, meaning you can place them in your walls as well. Another unorthodox block to disguise lighting is a bed. Since you see underneath the bed, you'll usually need to combine this with another hidden lighting method, such as the previously mentioned piston trick. You can also simply block people's view using something like slabs, but keep in mind that if you actually intend to use the bed in-game, you'll need to leave a valid spawning space somewhere around it, or you won't be able to respawn there. Getting a bit more creative with it, you can also place the bed in the ceiling and have the light shine through it that way. The bottom of the bed has a nice wood texture, so it can blend quite well if you have the right style of ceiling. Next we have the Cauldron. The Cauldron is good for a lot of little silly details. Things like planters, mailboxes, or even just a garbage can. But it's a little bit tricky to use with hidden lighting because the bottom isn't solid. Normally you'll want to combine this with another method. Again, pistons are frequently a solid choice here. One more interesting way of utilizing cauldrons for lighting is to put them in the ceiling with the light source on top. The light will still shine through, and you can get some pretty interesting ceiling designs if you work it into your build style. Also, while not technically a hidden lighting technique, if your build has the need for a boiling pot or a witch's cauldron, you can just have a fire lit underneath it, which will still let the light through, and it'll look pretty cool. A block similar in appearance to the cauldron is the hopper. They're not used too often with hidden lighting in mind, but if you have the right situation, they can be quite handy. Obviously, the main benefit here is that you can use these both to add hidden lighting, as well as to sneak some extra redstone into your builds. Much like the cauldron, you can also put the hopper in the ceiling and use it for lighting that way. Its shape tends to limit what you can do with it, but I find it works really well for some interesting supports. And the small end of the hopper is also coincidentally the same size as a fence post, making it a good way to connect fences to the ceiling. I think most people know about this next one. We're moving on to chests. It's a common thing to see people hide lighting underneath their chests. It's an easy and very effective solution to lighting up any storage area. Of course, you'll usually want to combine this together with other hidden lighting techniques to get a cleaner look. This is also the first technique where redstone lamps come into play. When you place a block like a chest, which is just slightly smaller than a full block, on top of a redstone lamp, you can only see the dark border of the lamp beneath it. If you want to get the most light possible out of your concealed lighting while still keeping that clean look, this is a really good way to do it. Next up we have the daylight sensor. Honestly, this one is pretty rarely used for hidden lighting due to how tricky it is to integrate it into most building styles. It can be an interesting block if you can find a way to sneak it into your builds, and do keep in mind that you can right-click it to switch its mode, giving you both a brown and a blue version to work with. One other useful way of utilizing this block is to place it in the ceiling, as its bottom texture works surprisingly well as little ceiling tiles. The only real downside to this is that looking at this texture is likely to make you want a candy bar. Moving on, our next block is all of the different doors that we have in the game. At first glance, these don't seem particularly useful for hidden lighting, but in the right situation, they can save you quite a lot of hassle. Sneaking lighting in from other rooms through your doors, or even adding things like small closets specifically just to hide some lighting in them, is a great way to light your interiors a little bit. Also keep in mind that iron doors can't be opened without redstone, so if you can integrate those into your build as a locked room, that's an easy way to sneak some extra light in without much work. If you're feeling particularly creative, you can also use doors to create stuff like a gate for an old medieval forge, which you could even light since doors don't burn, or even build an entire wall out of them. And naturally you can conceal your lighting in those as well. Keeping with the theme of doors, let's move on to trapdoors. These are frequently used when making lighting look good, rather than hiding it, and the fact that we only have the two options, which both have huge holes in them, makes them a little bit tricky to use when trying to completely conceal our lights. That being said, if you combine this with some of the other tricks you've seen here, then you can get some nice effects out of them. And since the change is in 1.9 when we can place them wherever we want to, they're just that much better. The fact that we only have two textures does make them a little bit limiting, but maybe someday we'll get the rest of the material types for them. Hint hint, Mojang. Next up is one of the oldest hidden lighting tricks around, hiding light behind a painting. Now there's not much to say about this one. You have a light in your wall, you slap a painting on top of it, and you're done. Of course, that's assuming that you have 15 minutes to keep replacing paintings until you get the one you want. Similarly, you can also put maps into item frames and create a map wall and hide lights behind that, which also looks pretty cool. If you're after some hidden lighting with a more magical feel to it, then you can also hide some underneath your enchanting table. This is a great method, and I personally use this pretty much every time I build an enchanting area. Of course, the light will also travel through the enchanting table from the top, which gives you a nice obsidian style texture to work with in your ceilings. It does have a black border on it, preventing it from blending seamlessly with regular obsidian, but it's still a really neat texture to keep in mind. Sticking with the magical theme, portals also allow light through. Now this is normally not important because portals themselves give off a light level of 11, but if you're trying to really squeeze out that maximum light level from every source possible, hiding some bright light sources behind the portal can give you the couple extra blocks you might need. Next on the list are slime blocks. Admittedly, it is a pretty rare circumstance to have slime blocks lingering around your builds for aesthetics, and their transparency makes them a little bit difficult to use for it even if you do. But if you're the type to have a lot of redstone contraptions around your base, they can still come in quite handy for hidden lighting. Since both slime blocks and pistons allow light through, you can frequently sneak some extra lighting in most machines that use them. Slime block elevators are obviously the prime example of this. Moving on to something a little bit more useful, we have snow layers. This is probably my favorite hidden lighting technique of all because of how sneaky it can be. Basically, light will shine through snow layers and will do so regardless of how many there are, meaning you could stack them all the way up to 8, which is a full snow block, and the light will still shine through. If you're working on anything that has snow involved, this trick is absolutely amazing. There is one unfortunate caveat to the snow layer trick though, which is that if the light level on their block is 12 or higher, they will melt. This means that your light sources need to be placed a little bit further away, and because of that, you'll need more light sources in general to keep your builds lit up. But because it's so easy to keep your lighting hidden with this trick, it's normally not an issue. Another interesting option, but one that depends on using redstone lamps specifically, is to use pressure plates. Pressure plates are another block that is just big enough to block the bright parts of a redstone lamp, making it effectively hidden as a light source. It's relatively easy to sneak some of these into most build styles without breaking your aesthetic too much, so it's a great trick to know. One thing you can use in combination with the pressure plate trick is Armorstands. Since Armorstands are an entity, they will actually trigger the pressure plate, meaning the redstone lamp below will be powered automatically. If you use a stone pressure plate, the base of the Armorstand blends in really well with it, which helps disguise the fact that it's a light source even further. You can also use Armorstands themselves for hidden lighting. If you have a fully armored Armorstand, you can place a torch on the same block, and it will be effectively concealed from view. The torch particles do show up a little bit, but if that bothers you, then you can just replace the torch with an end rod, which has a much more subtle particle effect that you won't see through the armor. But you will need to push the end rod into place with pistons if you go that route. Next we'll cover water, a really cool block to hide lighting with, but one that is unfortunately a little bit limiting. Water has a property that makes it reduce light levels by 2 each block instead of 1, meaning that your hidden lighting is more quickly diminished and you can't get as far with it. Combined with the fact that, assuming you want your lighting completely hidden, you need to put your light at least 1 block further back in the water, you don't really have much room to play with. But at the very least, having backlit water does look pretty cool. One trick that does get a lot of use though is to hide a light source under a water block that you use to irrigate your crops, and then placing a lily pad or a carpet on top of that water block. This gives you a little bit of extra light, water for your plants, and prevents items from falling into that water all at the same time. I will cover ice quickly, just because it is technically a block that allows light through. Ice suffers from similar problems to water in that it drops light levels by 2 each block, but it also has the same melting limitations similar to those of snow layers, which, unfortunately, makes it pretty much worthless when it comes to hidden lighting. There are plenty of other blocks that light can pass through as well, but aren't typically used as a method of hidden lighting on their own. In particular, I find things like cobblestone walls, the various fence and fence gate types, and signs to be useful building and detail blocks that can also be used when hiding lighting. Of course, those aren't the only ones. Like I said, there are many other blocks in the game that the light can shine through as well, and remembering those means you can better spot the areas where you can conceal your lighting. Now going through every single one individually would double the length of this tutorial, and realistically most of them are common sense, So I'm just going to go ahead and list them all off so you can see all the possibilities. There are anvils, banners, brewing stands, boats, buttons, cactus, cake, chorus fruit, chorus plants, crops, that's wheat, potatoes, carrots, beets, and netherwort, cobblestone walls, cobwebs, dragon eggs, and crystals, and chests, and portal frames, fences, fence gates, ferns, flowers, grass, heads of players and mobs, iron bars, item frames, ladders, levers, lily pads, minecarts, mushrooms, plant stems, portals, rails of all sorts, redstone dust, redstone torches, redstone repeaters, redstone comparators, saplings, signs, sugarcane, and vines. Whew. Well, you now know every single block in the game that light can shine through. And if you keep all of these tips and tricks in mind, mostly the ones I elaborated on earlier, while you're building, you'll start to notice plenty of ways that you can sneak some extra lighting into your builds. Naturally, if you have any questions about any of the things I've shown you here today, then feel free to ask me about them down in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to help you out. So, that's everything that I wanted to show you guys today. Hopefully you learned something new, and I'll see you guys next time.